Tonight on The Story.
I'm losing hope. I'm scared to death right now because I don't know where he is.
The mental health crisis.
You know, I'm just scared that he's going to do something
From a new perspective.
dangerous, and he might not only hurt himself but somebody else.
Investigative reporter Evan Watson's Uncommitted series has explored the high bar necessary to treat people against their will for mental illness.
I just think we went too far in the wrong direction.
But tonight, a first-hand account of the decades-long struggle for one mom whose son has gone through the civil commitment process 4 times.
I don't want to criminalize his mental illness.
For her, it's one step forward followed by several steps back.
And they released him to the streets of Portland in hospital socks.
Unable to get the long-term care her son desperately needs.
It's a horrible, vicious cycle.
Here's the story.
This was a good one. I took him fishing with his dad.
Photos capture a moment,
Okay. I take more pictures of him when he's well.
a memory
He's not well in this picture.
of a different time.
He's not doing so well in this photo. But he's not terrible.
For many, scrolling through photo albums is
Yeah.
a way to remember the past. For Janet Meister, it's all she has in the present.
If he didn't have the illness, I believe this is who he is. But the illness has definitely changed him. It's awful.
This is Janet's son, Brett. He's lived his adult life with serious mental illness.
They've landed on schizoaffective disorder, which is a great combination of bipolar and schizophrenia.
He's 41 now?
Yeah, he'll be 42. If he lives long enough, in August.
At the core of Brett's story is a lifetime of experiences with forced treatment. Brett has been civilly committed 4 times. Evaluators and a judge found his mental illness to be a serious threat to himself or others and sent him to the Oregon State Hospital for involuntary care.
This one was while he was in the state hospital on one of
Janet took many of these photos on outings during his stays in Salem. We've reported in the past how Oregon has a very high standard for forced mental health treatment. Many people who say no to treatment are released from hospitals and end up homeless with debilitating mental illnesses. They're unable to seek care on their own, but can't be forced into it. Brett's story offers a different view of our state's struggles to help patients with severe mental illness. He's been forced into treatment through the civil commitment process, but is unable to get the long-term care that he needs.
The civil commitment hold is only good for 6 months, and during that time he is required to take medication. But as soon as that 6 months is up, the go down the drain or in the trash or whatever. And so then the clock starts ticking. And it takes a little while for him for the drugs to leave his system, and then he gets sick again. So it's a horrible, vicious cycle that we haven't found the the magic cure to break.
Brett would be released, then his condition would deteriorate.
You know, we have our good months and then we have our bad years. And that's kind of how it's been. And as a parent, you just never really want to give up and you don't want to lose hope, but I'm losing hope. I'm scared to death right now because I don't know where he is.
Part of the problem for people like Brett, there's often nowhere to go for treatment. The Oregon State Hospital is accepting fewer and fewer civil commitment patients each year, prioritizing people who are facing criminal charges. As a result, Oregon's 4 largest health systems, Providence, Legacy, Peace Health, and St. Charles, are suing the state health authority. The hospitals say they're being forced to keep patients with serious mental illness for months in rooms that aren't built for long-term care. After decades of experience with her son, Janet Meister believes forced treatment for people like Brett should be required, not optional.
Brett should never be off medication. He's not safe in the community. The community is not safe with him in the community.
She knows what a difference that can make. Listen to these 2 voicemails Brett left for his mother.
Yeah.
The first is from when he was off his meds.
You're the dumbest piece of that ever walked the planet, and making kids in this and bringing somebody into hell, because you are the dumbest piece of that ever walked the planet, and I'm going to torture you so bad before I kill you. Mark my words.
Okay, so he's not well.
6 weeks later,
6
while
weeks
on new
later.
medication, he sent this.
I was calling because I'm excited to tell you the good news. I think we found actually I'm pretty sure, I know we found the right medication mixture to deal with my chemical imbalance. I think it's wonderful news and outstanding, and I'm thrilled. Anyway, love you. Have a good night. Bye.
So quite the difference, huh? I like him better, the second one.
Do you view this as you're his mother, no one loves him like you do, and from your perspective, forced care and treatment is the most empathetic route for him now?
Absolutely. What's happening to him now is inhumane. It's just inhumane.
Janet and Brett's father are still deeply involved in trying to help their son, but family members can't force civil commitment.
I completely understand the families that have to walk away because it takes over your life.
The cycle continues. The photos, as important as ever.
You know, he gets better, but he doesn't get better like he did 3 betters ago. Yeah, it's very hard to get him the help he needs. We have a crisis.
Evan joins me now. Okay, what's the latest with Brett?
Since I talked with Janet, Brett's mom, in this interview, she was able to find Brett. He had been admitted to Unity for behavioral health evaluation. In this case, he didn't meet the state standard for forced treatment, so the family believes he was released and he's now back living in the van on the street, still suffering from severe mental illness.
And why can't the state hold him longer?
The state standard is 180 days, 6 months, and that's state law. So that would need to change if we're going to have any changes to that here.
Yeah, all right. Well, we do need to change that law. And then finally, what's the latest on the court cases?
The court cases we have, the judge recently denied the motion from the hospital healthcare systems when it comes to that. They've tried other ways around that to force the Oregon State Hospital, Oregon Health Authority to keep people longer. But so far they've been unsuccessful. We'll see if that changes or they'll try a new route down the line. And I do want to add as well, from the state level, the Oregon Judicial Department has a work group that they've worked on starting last fall to try to come up with some changes, some legal changes to this, and they're going to produce a report in the spring, coming up in April, to lawmakers. This latest session, the kind of proposed bills to change legal standards didn't get out of committee, and representatives told me that instead lawmakers chose to invest in the current system, which they said was underfunded for many years now, rather than focus on legal changes or big changes like that.
Okay.
So, preference at the moment.
We'll be watching then. Thanks a lot, Evan Watson. Appreciate it. Well, we'd love to hear your thoughts on Evan's story. Maybe you know of a similar situation in your life that you'd like to share. You could email us. The address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail. The number is 503-226-5090. And Evan's story may be reminding you a little bit about a story our team did yesterday. Blair Best showed us a mom's wrenching struggle to find her daughter on the streets of Portland, to rescue her from her addiction. Both stories feature moms dealing with illness that they're simply not equipped to handle. And we know they are not alone in their struggles. Thousands of people have watched Blair's story online since we aired it at 6 o'clock yesterday. If you missed it and you want to check it out, you should. Head to the KGW YouTube channel and then scroll down to the story section. And you can find individual segments like Blair's story and also the full episodes of our show. It's updated every weekday. Back in 2019, I was covering Oregon's legislature as a Republican walkout was looming. Yep, they did it back then too. They were trying to stop some climate change legislation then. Things were starting to get pretty tense and the rhetoric was flying. There was even word that the governor would send the state police to find missing Republicans if they did walk out and then drag them back to the building to allow a vote. And so, as I roamed the Senate offices looking for someone to talk with, I ran into Senator Brian Boquist, a Republican at the time. He's an independent now. I asked about that idea that state troopers might soon be looking for him, and this is what he had to say.
Well, I'm quotable, so here's the quote. This is what I told the superintendent. Send bachelors and come heavily armed. I'm not going to be a political prisoner in the state of Oregon. It's just that simple.
Now, I have to admit, I was so shocked by his comment that I burst out laughing. My instant take was that it was a way over the top hyperbole from a politician who definitely knows how to issue shocking statements. But a lot of other people did not find that funny at all. Senate leaders eventually forced Boquist to give 12 hours notice before he could even enter the Capitol building. It was so, they said, that they could make sure that extra police were on hand. Boquist followed the rule for a while, but he really didn't like it and eventually sued the Senate President, Peter Courtney, and 2 other senators in federal court. He argued that they deprived him of his First Amendment right by retaliating against his speech. This week, federal judge Michael McShane agreed with Boquist. And now before you say, oh, he's probably just one of those crazy Republican judges, no, he's really not. He was appointed by President Obama and serves in the Eugene area. So let's take a look at a couple of points here to set the table for our discussion. The First Amendment states, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. I just wanted to make sure that we're all clear on the text of that First Amendment. You hear about it, but, it's good to get a refresher. And by the way, we journalists love that amendment. We're the only trade, we think, specifically protected in the Constitution, which I got to say I think is pretty dang awesome. Okay, but back to our focus. The part we care about here says basically Congress cannot make a law abridging the freedom of speech. And for our purpose here, abridging means to cut back or diminish or reduce. Okay, so the federal judge took a look at what happened and said that by punishing Boquist for his outrageous comment, Senate leadership was actually depriving his right to freedom of speech. Judge McShane wrote in his opinion, because the 12-hour notice rule served no legitimate purpose other than to retaliate against plaintiff after he engaged in protected speech, defendant's actions violated plaintiff's First Amendment rights to free speech and association. Now, as part of his discussion of that 12-hour rule, Judge McShane pointed out that Senator Boquist was really never prevented from entering the building or speaking on the Senate floor, even when he stopped giving advance notice that he'd be there. The judge also pointed out that state police never increased the number of officers in the building when Boquist was there. So that 12-hour rule was kind of fake. And by the way, that's not my opinion. The judge had scathing things to say about the Senate Conduct Committee, which issued that rule. He wrote, "This entire process appears to be a publicity stunt by a committee with no authorization seeking to impose a sanction against a member that it never intended to force." But wait, oh my, there's more. When asked why she was afraid that Boquist could turn to violence, former Senator Shemia Fagan gave a statement that Boquist had a reputation as having a military ops background and has possibly killed people. So she said that made him a real threat. Well, here's what the judge said to that. The court will not entertain defendant's prejudiced contention that plaintiff's veteran status makes him more likely to carry out a violent attack. It is insulting to veterans. If members were truly worried of a shooting, statistically, they should bar teenagers from the Senate, not veterans. There is a bunch more. The judge's discussion of the case runs 25 pages, but the final paragraph pretty much sums it all up for us. The court finds that defendant's implementation of the 12-hour rule was a retaliatory act against plaintiff in violation of his First Amendment rights to free speech and association. The judge ruled for Senator Brian Boquist, awarded him $1 in damages, and told the state to pay his legal fees for the case. Senator Boquist issued a statement of his own today. Part of it reads, "I hope the success of this court case benefits Oregonians who are maligned and put in tough positions for speaking freely, an inherently American right." So there's that. Now, we also want to know what your thoughts are on this one. Was Boquist punished because Democrats did not like him or what he said, or was that really a threat? Send us your thoughts, will you? The email is thestory@kgw.com. The voicemail is 503-226-5090. I look forward to hearing from you. Coming up next, Cale Williams and I are down at the Multnomah County Courthouse to talk about a $50 billion lawsuit filed in connection with climate change and that deadly heat dome.
Now, the county says that these fossil fuel companies need to pay up, but there have been dozens of cases like this in the past. So what makes this one different?
That's a great question. We're going to dig into that and much more when the story returns. Last month, Multnomah County filed a $50 billion, yes, that's with a B, $50 billion lawsuit against some of the world's largest fossil fuel companies. The argument? The companies and their products made climate change worse. And climate change was the cause of the devastating heat dome here in 2021. We thought a lawsuit of that size probably deserved a deeper look. So environmental reporter Cale Williams got into the weeds to study the county's argument. He focused on this question: what makes this case different from the others in the past that have struggled to hold the fossil fuel industry accountable for climate change?
This is focused on a specific event, which long before the case was filed, climate scientists had already studied and determined was caused by carbon pollution.
That's Jeffrey Simon, one of the lawyers representing Multnomah County in a lawsuit seeking more than $50 billion in damages from 17 of the world's largest fossil fuel companies. The lawsuit argues those companies are responsible for climate change, which led to the 2021 heat dome. The heat dome saw temperatures peak at 116 degrees in Portland. At least 69 people died in the county. Hundreds more were sent to the hospital. Now, there have been dozens of cases brought by cities and counties and states over climate change, but Simon says this one is different.
The Pacific Northwest heat dome of June 2021 is entirely different because it is irrefutably scientifically caused by carbon pollution.
In some other cases, attorneys have struggled to provide a direct link between carbon pollution and extreme weather events.
There is always some argument about whether or not one can or cannot scientifically mete out what is the role of carbon pollution here.
But that's not the case with the heat dome. Simon points to a study that came out after the heat dome that said the record-breaking temperatures would have been, quote, virtually impossible without the effects of climate change. Lisa Benjamin, an environmental law professor at Lewis and Clark in Portland and an expert on climate litigation, says the study sets the Multnomah County case apart.
Multnomah County has this very specific attribution study that says that these impacts, deaths, and the costs of climate change would have been virtually impossible without anthropogenic climate change.
Now, I reached out to all 17 of the companies named in the lawsuit, including Shell, Chevron, and BP. Most of them didn't respond, and a few said they couldn't comment on pending lawsuits. A spokesperson from Shell sent a statement saying the company fully supports action on climate change, but we do not believe the courtroom is the right venue to address climate change, but that smart policy from government and action from all sectors is the appropriate way to reach solutions and drive progress. Benjamin, though, she noted that this case is not about setting policy.
But that's not what Multnomah is doing here. They're asking for damages and the cost of abatement moving forward.
Simon said the county was seeking $50 million in direct damages from the heat dome, including taxpayer money spent on healthcare services and damaged infrastructure. The lawsuit also asks for another $50 billion fund to pay for upgrades that will be needed to respond to these kinds of heat events, which will become more common as climate change worsens.
To unfortunately have to reimagine the infrastructure of Multnomah County to withstand that kind of heat for which it was never built. It was never constructed. It's not Phoenix.
For her part, Benjamin noted that it is often the people who are least able to afford it who end up paying for the damage done by climate change.
So these are rural communities where it's harder to get to hospitals and health clinics. They're the elderly, they're children, they're Black and brown communities. These are communities that can least afford to pay the cost of climate change and yet are subsidizing the activities of these corporations.
So I'm here with Cale now in front of the county courthouse where this, I guess, lawsuit is being filed. I gotta say, with the lead lawyer stating the case to us emphatically, I mean, he's got an axe to grind. Is there really a good study that ties these things together?
I mean, this study was peer-reviewed. It came out right after the heat dome, and they said that this type of event was 150 times less likely to have occurred without the effects of climate change. I mean, you can read the study for yourself. We've got it linked in the story up on our website, so our viewers can take a look. But I mean, it's a well-respected study.
Okay, so we're not just taking the lawyer's word for it, because I'm sure the lawyer is very smart, but, you know, they have an angle.
They do. No, I did stories on this study when it came out, which was only, I think, 3 or 4 weeks after the heat dome itself. And this is widely accepted by a huge amount of scientists in the climate community.
So then my other question is, does the lawsuit ever go anywhere, or does this become like the lawsuit that all the young people have filed to stop global warming, and it just drags out for years and years and then gets dismissed somewhere?
Well, there's a few differences. I mean, that case was really looking to stop practices by the fossil fuel companies. This case is looking for monetary damages. As Jessica Vega Peterson said when they did their press conference there the day it was announced, they aren't looking for a payout, they're looking to be paid back for money that they already spent. And there's another key difference. A lot of these cases, you know, the fossil fuel companies have tried to move them to federal court. That's one of their delay tactics that the lawyers told me about. The Supreme Court ruled just this April that these cases can and should be heard in state court. So I think we're likely to see a trial here at some point.
That'll be interesting. And they say they're not trying to create policy, but we did see, like in the tobacco lawsuits, that did end up in huge monetary awards and also policy.
Yeah, I think there are some similarities and some differences in these cases. And with this one, they really are trying to stay away from policy because they've seen the tactics that fossil fuel companies have used in the past to try to deflect on these types of things, and they have worked to preempt them. You know, the move to federal court, there's a bolded line in the lawsuit that says, we disclaim any allegation of violation of federal law. This is strictly about state law. That's all we're looking for. So they have seen what hasn't worked in the past, and I think they're making moves to try to preempt that.
Yeah. All right. Super interesting. Thanks, Cale. Appreciate the update on that.
My pleasure.
Coming up at 6:30, up in flames, what fire crews had to contend with as they responded to an abandoned Kmart with an intriguing history. Plus, can you smell the smoke? We have an update out of Longview where an industrial blaze continues to burn. Why it could take a while to put out. And one of the suspects accused of throwing rocks onto the interstate and rattling drivers in Fairview has been indicted. We have details up next at 6:30. Hope to see you then.
Well, that's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching. And remember, the story, our collective story, that never ends. Stick around now for the news at 6:30, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow.